In this busy and anxious life, we sometimes feel tired, like a small leaf being swept away by the rushing flow of life. Worries, sadness, and invisible breakdowns cling to us, making it impossible for the heart to find peace. But did you know? Peace is not something we search for outside, but a place within our soul where we can find stillness and let go of all worries. The Buddha taught that the more you practice, the calmer your mind becomes. This does not mean that practice will make us give up all emotions or everyday life. In fact, practicing is returning to oneself, being awake to realize that peace can only be found when we no longer race after things beyond our control. When we are deep enough to not be swept away by the storms outside, but instead have a soul that is calm and steady enough not to be pushed around. In practice, nothing is quick, nothing is free. It is a long process, a gradual journey through small steps to calm the waves in the heart. When we learn to face pain without running away, to listen to emotions without judgment, that is when we open the door to peace. Every breath, every slow step leads us to a peaceful land where we can understand that peace is not the silence outside, but the stillness within the heart. We don't need to become someone else. Just be ourselves, living truthfully with our emotions, difficulties, and simple joys. And from there, the heart will naturally become calm, no longer swept away by demands or expectations from the outside world. When the mind is still, you will see that peace is not something distant, but is here in every moment we live and breathe. There is a small story I want to share with you. Once, when I was sitting with an old friend, she told me about her busy life and the endless worries she faces every day. She said it felt like she was a small leaf, floating in the rushing river, unable to control everything around her. She had to wake up early, rush to work, then return home late with worries that never ended. Unfinished work, children to take care of, family relationships that were sometimes tense. At the end of the day, all she wanted was a moment of stillness to breathe, but she didn't know where to find peace. Her story truly made me reflect. We all have moments like that when we feel tired, with no energy to continue, just wishing for a peaceful place to rest. We are swept away by worries about work, family, and things we must do. Life seems to become an endless race. And when we look back, we realize that we have forgotten something important: ourselves. The Buddha taught that the mind is like water. If it's not filtered daily, it becomes muddy. This is a profound teaching, but if we look at our daily lives, we will certainly see that we are living in a sea of murky water without knowing how to clean it. When the mind is caught up in too many worries, like a leaf being swept away by a whirlpool, we can hardly realize that true peace lies within ourselves. We keep chasing after things outside, forgetting that one of the most important steps to finding peace is to return to ourselves, to relax and let the soul rest. Today, with ever-changing living conditions, life has become busier and more stressful. Information technologies, social networks, and work demands constantly push us into an endless cycle. We may feel that we cannot stop, cannot pause. Like wheels that spin continuously, sometimes we just want to step outside that cycle and find a little peace. You might feel this way in yourself. A long day with meetings, conversations, emails to reply to, unread messages, unfinished tasks. It feels like everything keeps piling up, and you feel surrounded by never-ending tasks. You try to make everything perfect, but the more you do, the more tired and drained you feel. You want a space to pause, but you don't know where to start. Try to imagine a day in your life like a small leaf being swept away in the rushing water. In the early morning, you wake up with worries in your mind. You hurriedly prepare your things, make breakfast, drop the kids off at school, then rush to the office with back-to-back meetings. In your head, issues keep swirling, tasks to do, what this person needs, what that person wants. You keep running after the endless demands from society, work, and family life. With each passing hour, you feel yourself drifting further away from peace. As the afternoon comes, you return home, tired, and have no energy to do what you enjoy. You might want to relax for a bit, but then think about the pile of unfinished work or other worries. In the end, all you want is a quiet moment to rest, to find stillness. But that feeling seems too far away. You are swept away in the flow of life, unable to find the shore of peace. The worries and fatigue in life sometimes make us forget that peace is not something we find outside, but a state we can create within our own soul. The Buddha taught that we don't need to go far. We don't need to search anywhere outside of ourselves. When the mind is swept away by worries, that is when we need to stop and return to ourselves. You must have heard about the story of a monk. There was an old monk living in a small temple on the mountain. Every day, he only did simple tasks: sweeping the yard, chopping firewood, watering the plants, reading scriptures, and welcoming guests. One day, a visitor came and asked him why he lived such a life, not participating in social activities or having a busy job. The old monk smiled and replied, "Every day I do my work with a peaceful heart, not being swept into worries. The peace in my heart is the most important thing, and when my heart is still, I feel the peace, not because the world outside is peaceful, but because I have accepted everything as it is." This story shows that instead of trying to change everything outside, we can change the way we perceive things, change the way we live to create peace within our soul. Peace is not something too distant, but a presence in every moment. When the soul is calm, you will find that even though there may be storms inside, everything remains still. One of the valuable lessons the Buddha teaches is letting go. The Buddha advised us not to cling to anything, including thoughts, worries, and negative emotions. When we let go of unnecessary things, we open up a space for peace within our hearts. Sometimes we are too strict with ourselves, wanting everything to be perfect and feeling uneasy if we don't solve every task. But in reality, peace doesn't come from solving all the problems, but from knowing how to face them calmly and relax. When we understand that some things cannot be controlled, we will worry less and feel lighter. Life sometimes makes us forget ourselves, but peace is not an external destination. It is a journey back to ourselves. Small steps to realize that when we stop clinging to worries, when we stop trying to control everything, is when we truly find peace within. Try once to sit down gently, close your eyes, and simply breathe. Let the thoughts pass by without attaching to them, like clouds floating in the sky. Feel each breath, each heartbeat, and you will see that peace is always right here, within you. So, you can see that fatigue and worries are inevitable in modern life. But what's important is that we need to know how to create peace from within. The Buddha taught that the more we practice the mind, the more we calm down, the more we understand the nature of suffering, the easier it is to find stillness and peace in life. Take a moment, breathe deeply, and listen to yourself. That is the first step to finding peace in your heart. Life sometimes makes us tired, not because of work or big challenges, but because we forget how to stop and return to ourselves. In the whirlpool of worries, sometimes we get carried away too far, to the point where we no longer recognize who we are, what we need, and what we are searching for. We live in a world full of busyness, full of noise and constant demands from the outside. However, true peace does not come from chasing after these things, but from stopping to return to ourselves, to find the stillness in our soul. The Buddha taught that in order to find peace, we do not need to search for it far away, but simply return to ourselves. The Buddha said, "Those who know how to stop will find peace in their hearts." It sounds simple, but in reality, not everyone can do this, especially in the modern world full of distractions and worries. Returning to oneself is not about doing something grand, but simply stopping for a moment in the busy times to listen to our hearts. Sometimes just a little silence, a short period of time to stop and feel what is going on inside is enough. When we can do that, we will realize that all the worries, all the tangled thoughts, all the negative emotions are just temporary fragments that will dissolve when we allow ourselves to listen and breathe gently. There is a story I love to tell about a man seeking peace. He lived in a noisy city with stressful work and unhappy family relationships. One day, he decided to leave everything behind and go in search of peace. He went to high mountains, deep forests, hoping to find peace in the wilderness of nature. But no matter where he went, no matter how he searched, his soul still did not feel at ease. He felt tired and disappointed because even standing in the magnificent nature, he still could not find peace. One day, while sitting by a stream, he met an old monk. The monk looked at him and smiled, asking, "What are you searching for?" The man replied, "I am searching for peace in my heart, but I don't know where to go or what to do to find it." The old monk said nothing, just sat down beside him. They sat together for a long while in complete silence, only the sound of the stream flowing. After a while, the old monk gently said, "Peace is not outside of you. It only requires you to return to yourself, listen, and breathe deeply." The man was surprised and realized that, all this time, he had been searching for peace outside, forgetting that true peace must come from within. When he stopped, took the time to return, and listened to his heart, he began to feel the peace he had overlooked before. Returning to oneself is not something that can be done immediately, but a long journey, a process of stopping, listening, and accepting oneself. We do not need to search for peace far away, because it is always right inside our soul. When the mind is too busy, too anxious about the future, about things we cannot control, we may feel lost, like a leaf being swept away in the flow of life. But when we know how to stop, breathe deeply, and look back at ourselves, we will find peace in our hearts. One simple way to return to oneself is to practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is not a difficult technique, but a simple habit, paying attention to every moment, living in the present, and feeling life around us. When you begin practicing mindfulness, you will find that all worries, all frustrations are just temporary thoughts. And when you let go of them, you will find peace right within yourself. Here's a simple example. You are sitting alone in a room, feeling as if everything around you is very busy. Instead of trying to do something, you simply stop and listen to your breath. You don't need to do anything. Just feel the breath in, the breath out. And in each breath, you will realize that you are here, you are alive, and you have the right to feel peace within yourself. You may feel that this peace is very small, like a gentle breeze passing by, but it is precisely in these moments that you begin to realize that nothing other than yourself is necessary to find peace. A hot cup of tea, a peaceful morning, a moment of stillness by the porch can bring the peace you've been searching for all this time. Returning to oneself also means learning to accept oneself, to accept all emotions, weaknesses, and flaws. We don't always have to be strong. We don't always have to be perfect. Sometimes, peace comes from accepting that we are not perfect. And that too is part of who we are. When you learn to accept all parts of yourself, you will feel relieved because you don't have to force yourself to become someone else. The Buddha taught, look at yourself with compassion and understanding. When you look at yourself with compassion, you will no longer blame or judge yourself. You will only see a loving person, with flaws, but also full of potential. It is in this acceptance that you will find peace. Modern life makes it easy for us to forget ourselves. We are busy with work, family, and constant responsibilities. But if we don't know how to return to ourselves, we will feel tired, exhausted, and lost. Sometimes, just a brief moment of silence in the day to stop and breathe, to return to yourself, is enough to help you find peace again. A famous saying by the Buddha that I always resonate with is, when our mind is still, all the storms outside are just the wind. This means that when we find peace within ourselves, we are no longer overly affected by what happens around us. we will have enough calmness to face any difficulty, any challenge, without feeling swept away or defeated. Returning to oneself is not an easy task, but it is an incredibly valuable journey. To find peace from within, we need to know how to stop, listen, and accept ourselves. Don't let the noise of life sweep us away, forgetting that true peace can only be found when we return to ourselves, learning to live in each present moment. When you know how to stop and listen, you will realize that peace is not far away, but right in each of your breaths. In life, each person will have to face unavoidable challenges and difficulties. In these times, emotions like anger, sadness, disappointment, or even despair may arise. However, when we learn to face these emotions honestly and calmly, we will see that true peace does not lie in avoiding or denying negative emotions, but in the ability to keep our minds steady and calm in any circumstance. The Buddha taught, the mind is like water. If not filtered every day, it becomes muddy. This reminds us that our emotions, like water, can become cloudy if not cleaned and adjusted regularly. Every day, we receive different emotions: joy, happiness, but also sadness, anger, disappointment. The important thing is not how we feel, but how we face and handle those emotions. Practicing honesty with our emotions does not mean allowing ourselves to be swept away by negative emotions. In fact, the Buddha taught that maintaining calmness is not about having no emotions, but knowing how to keep the mind from being controlled by them. When we are honest with ourselves, we will realize that these emotions are just a part of life, not everything. If we learn to face them without letting them control us, our soul will be peaceful and calm. There is a small story in Buddhism about a monk who, after many years of practice, felt that his soul had become very peaceful and no longer swayed by the things around him. One day, he entered a village to ask for food, but since it was not yet mealtime, no one in the village offered him anything. He felt very sad and disappointed because he had walked for hours, but no one gave him anything to eat. Frustration and discomfort rose within him. But instead of letting these emotions control him, he decided to sit down under an old tree, close his eyes, and breathe deeply. He didn't try to hide his disappointment, but accepted it and felt it fully. He realized that this feeling was not something bad, but a natural part of life. He thought to himself, I cannot control what happens outside, but I can control how I react to it. After listening to and acknowledging his emotions for a while, he felt relieved and calm again. He stood up, thanked the villagers, even though they had not received him, and continued his journey. This story shows that keeping a calm mind is not about not having emotions, but about knowing how to face and control them. In daily life, each of us faces difficult situations that can make our emotions tense. It could be an argument with a loved one, a criticism from a colleague, or a failure at work that we had high expectations for. In such moments, we often easily get caught up in negative emotions and react strongly. However, if we practice being honest with our emotions and face them calmly, we will learn how not to let emotions control our lives. A simple example of this might be when you encounter a situation at work where you feel unfairly treated. Maybe you have worked hard, but the results were not what you expected. You might feel angry and disappointed, but instead of letting these emotions control you, you could take a moment to stop and listen to your emotions. Acknowledge that you are feeling dissatisfied, but don't let it last. Practicing honesty with your emotions is not about hiding or avoiding them, but accepting that you have them without letting them control you. When you feel angry, instead of reacting immediately, you could try breathing deeply and asking yourself, where is this emotion coming from? Why do I feel this way? This not only helps you understand yourself better, but also helps you handle the situation more wisely. When you don't let emotions control you, you will find that your soul feels lighter and you can face any difficulty without feeling exhausted or hurt. When we practice emotional calmness, we not only help ourselves live happier, but also improve the relationships around us. A person who can stay calm in any situation, face challenges without being swept away by negative emotions, is always a reliable and approachable person. They know how to handle difficult situations skillfully, without letting personal emotions spoil important relationships in life. The Buddha taught that when the mind is still, everything becomes clear. If we keep our minds calm, we will find that every problem becomes much easier. We will be able to view situations more objectively, without letting negative emotions cloud our judgment, and thus make wiser decisions. There is another story about an old monk living in a small temple. One day, a young man came to seek advice. He said that he had tried very hard to succeed in his career, but every time he was close to achieving what he wanted, he encountered failure. He was very sad and frustrated, feeling as if life was against him. The old monk listened and didn't reply immediately, but invited the young man to sit down and handed him a cup of water. Then the monk placed a stone in the cup of water and said, "Do you see? This stone is like the worries and failures you encounter. If you keep it in your heart, you will not be able to see the bigger picture of life. Let it float away like the flowing water, and you will see your soul become clearer." The young man sat for a while, realizing that he had been too focused on his failures and had forgotten that life is not only about failure, but also full of other wonderful things. He began to learn how to let go of his worries and found peace in each moment. Practicing honesty with our emotions is one of the important lessons in Buddhism, helping us keep our minds calm despite the challenges in life. The Buddha taught that, to achieve peace, we do not need to avoid our emotions, but learn how to face them calmly, acknowledge them, and not let them control our souls. Life may never be perfect, but when we know how to keep our minds calm and live truthfully with our emotions, we will realize that peace is not something distant, but a state that can exist within each of us, within our very heart and soul. We often seek peace outside of ourselves, perhaps in a distant trip, a long vacation, a quiet house, or even in harmonious relationships. We think that when these external factors become perfect, only then will we find peace in our hearts. However, the Buddha taught that true peace does not come from outside, but from the acceptance and letting go within our souls. True peace only comes when we learn to harmonize with everything in life without being swept away by external factors. The Buddha once taught, peace is not the absence of the storm, but the stillness in the heart when the storm is still raging. This is a very profound teaching, and it accurately reflects the essence of inner peace. Peace is not the absence of difficulty. It is not the absence of challenges or things we don't want happening in life. On the contrary, peace is the ability to keep our soul still and serene, even when everything outside is not perfect. Imagine someone sitting in meditation under a large tree. Outside, the wind is still blowing strongly, the leaves are rustling, and the surroundings are still full of noise. But the meditator remains sitting still, breathing evenly, and feeling the stillness in their heart. Even though many things are happening outside, they still experience absolute peace because their mind is not caught up in the external turmoil. Just like in life, we cannot avoid difficulties, challenges, or negative emotions. But if we can learn to maintain a steady mind, accept everything as it is, and not react negatively, we will find peace, even in situations that seem the most stressful. There is a story about a monk who lived in a small temple in a peaceful village. Every day, he woke up early to chant scriptures, sweep the yard, and do simple tasks at the temple. One day, a stranger came to visit and asked him, "Why did you choose to live such a simple life? Do you ever feel bored because you don't have the pleasures of the outside world?" The monk smiled and replied, "I do not need to seek pleasures from outside. Everything I need is already within me. Peace is not something I seek outside, but something I feel when I learn to live in the present and accept everything that happens without resistance." The stranger seemed surprised by the monk's response, but he did not ask further. Instead, he sat silently and began to feel the atmosphere around him. Gradually, he realized that life is not about what we do on the outside, but how we face and feel it. One of the most important elements in finding peace is acceptance. Acceptance does not mean resignation or giving up. Acceptance here is the realization that everything in life has its natural flow. Everything comes and goes, and we cannot control everything. When we learn to accept everything, we will no longer feel frustrated or helpless when facing difficulties. Let's take a simple example from daily life. You are walking on a familiar road, but suddenly it starts to rain. You might feel angry because it's raining, because you didn't bring an umbrella. Or you could realize that rain is just a natural phenomenon that you cannot control. You could accept that the rain will pass, and keeping your soul calm in this moment will bring you peace. When you no longer react negatively to the changes outside, your soul will become lighter. The Buddha also taught, when you realize that everything changes, you will no longer cling to what is temporary. We cannot hold on to things that do not belong to us forever. If we try to hold on to everything, we will only bring more suffering. Peace comes from accepting that everything changes, and we cannot control everything. An important part of inner peace is learning to let go. Letting go does not mean giving up everything, but not clinging to things that no longer hold meaning for us. We let go of expectations, fears, feelings of sorrow or anger that have haunted us. Letting go so we are no longer disturbed by things beyond our control. There is a story in Buddhist scriptures about a teacher and his student. One day, while walking along the road, the teacher encountered a large river. The student followed and felt very confused because he couldn't cross the river. The teacher looked at him and said, "You need to learn how to let go of the things that weigh you down so that your mind can be lighter and more easily overcome challenges." The student didn't understand right away, but after some time of reflection, he realized that worry, fear, and negative emotions had made him feel blocked, preventing him from finding a solution. When he learned to let go of those emotions, he crossed the river with ease and calmness. To achieve peace, we don't need to avoid the difficulties and challenges of life. The Buddha himself taught, peace is not the absence of the storm, but the steadiness of the boat. Life always has storms, and no one can avoid them. But peace does not come from the absence of difficulties. It comes from the ability to maintain stability and calmness, even when surrounded by storms. When our souls are strong enough, we will not be swept away by the changes in life. We will be able to view everything more objectively and find peace even in the most difficult situations. Peace does not come from the outside, but from acceptance and letting go. When we learn to accept life as it is, let go of unnecessary things, and keep our souls calm, we will find true peace within ourselves. Peace is not the absence of storms, but the ability to keep the soul steady during those storms. When we learn to live mindfully and let go of what we cannot control, we will find peace in every moment, even in the challenges and difficulties of life. Suffering is an inevitable part of life. Everyone will face sadness, loss, or challenges that sometimes feel impossible to overcome. However, according to the Buddha's teachings, practicing is not about finding ways to avoid suffering, but about learning how to face, understand, and master those pains. The more we practice, the more we calm the mind, meaning the more we understand the nature of suffering. From there, we will no longer be controlled by it and can live a life of peace and happiness. First, we need to understand that suffering is not something foreign, but an essential part of everyone's life. Suffering can come in many forms: the loss of loved ones, failure in work, or even the negative emotions we face every day. But the important thing is that the Buddha did not see suffering as something bad, but as part of existence, a challenge each person must face on the path to enlightenment. In Buddhist scriptures, the Buddha teaches, suffering is an essential part of human life. When we understand and face suffering, we will no longer be controlled by it. This may surprise us because usually we want to avoid all suffering. But the Buddha taught that suffering is not something to run from, but something we need to understand and integrate with. There is a story about a man who traveled everywhere in search of happiness. He visited many cities, met many monks and wise people, but still could not find happiness. One day, he arrived at a temple on top of a mountain where there was a famous teacher. He asked the teacher, "I have been searching for happiness for many years. Why can't I find it?" The teacher smiled and replied, "Happiness is not something you can find outside. It is right inside your heart. Happiness comes from facing pain, accepting it, and learning how to overcome it. If you want happiness, you must learn how to face suffering first." This answer made the man reflect deeply. He realized that throughout the years, he had been chasing an unreachable concept of happiness, not realizing that true happiness comes from facing the pains and difficulties of life. One of the core principles in the Buddha's teachings is that suffering is not the enemy, but a part of awakening. When we face suffering, we not only understand the nature of life, but also learn valuable lessons about patience, love, and compassion. The Buddha teaches, suffering is not the enemy, but our teacher. When a person knows how to face and accept suffering, they will learn many things that comfort cannot provide. We must remember that each challenge, each pain we experience can be an opportunity for us to grow and mature. If we cannot learn from those pains, we will forever be trapped in the cycle of suffering without escaping it. Imagine someone learning to paint. When they paint for the first time, the painting may be very poor, not resembling what they expected. But if they are patient and keep practicing, each time they paint will be a learning experience and progress. Suffering in life is just like this. It is not a bad thing, but an opportunity for us to learn and grow. There is another story about a mother who lost her child. She was a woman who loved her son dearly. One day, her child passed away in an accident. The mother was overwhelmed with grief, unable to accept the loss. She went to see the Buddha and asked him for help. The Buddha looked at her and asked, "What would you like me to do for you?" The mother choked on her words and said, "I want my son to come back to life. I cannot bear this pain." The Buddha smiled and said, "I can help you, but first you must find a family in this village where no one has ever died. When you find such a family, I will help you." The mother was surprised but agreed to go in search of it. She went through many villages, but she could not find a family where no one had ever died. She realized that every family had lost someone, and she was part of that loss. Finally, she returned and sat down before the Buddha. The Buddha looked at her and said, "Now, you understand that suffering is a part of life. When you learn to face suffering, you will find peace in your soul." The Buddha teaches that when we practice, we do not avoid suffering, but we learn how to face it. The more we practice, the more we calm the mind, meaning the more we understand the nature of suffering. And from that, we are no longer afraid or resistant. When we face pain, we not only learn how to endure, but also how to turn difficulties into valuable lessons. A practitioner is not someone who does not know suffering, but someone who knows how to stand firm in the face of life's challenges without being defeated by them. They know that suffering is just a part of life, and only when we face it, we truly grow. Practicing is not about avoiding suffering, but learning how to face and understand it. The more we practice, the more we become still, meaning we learn to accept suffering without being swept away by it. The more we understand the nature of life and learn to live peacefully despite challenges. When we face suffering honestly, we will no longer feel fear. Instead, we will find peace in the very challenges that life brings. This perspective not only helps us overcome suffering, but also helps us grow and awaken more. In daily life, we frequently face unexpected events, intense emotions, or unpredictable challenges. In such times, our minds can become confused, lost, or even anxious. However, true peace does not come from avoiding these difficulties, but from the ability to accept them without reacting hastily. It is the calmness in the mind, the ability to stay composed when facing upheaval, that will guide us to deep inner peace. The Buddha teaches, peace is not the absence of storms, but the steadiness of the boat. This shows that life will never be without challenges. Storms, difficulties, or suffering will always be present, but peace is not the absence of them, but the stability and stillness of the mind when we face them. When we can keep our souls calm, no matter how much turmoil there is outside, that is true peace. The stillness in the mind is not that we will not feel pain or disappointment, but the ability to face and accept them without being swept away, without letting them control our minds. Sometimes, peace comes from simply stopping to avoid reacting hastily to every situation. There is a story about a man living in a small village. He always felt uneasy and worried. Whenever he faced difficulties, he would often become confused and didn't know what to do. One day, he went to see a famous monk in the area, asking the monk to show him how to find peace in life. The monk smiled and said, "Go outside to the garden and see if there is a tree you like." He went out to the garden and found a beautiful flower tree. He came back and asked the monk, "Master, I saw a beautiful flower tree, but why do I not feel peace?" The monk replied, "That is because you are looking at the flower with a mind full of worries and haste. You want to see it as beautiful, but you don't allow yourself to stop and truly look at it. Peace is not something you can find somewhere. It comes when you learn to stop, allowing your mind not to be caught up in thoughts and worries. If you let your mind drift like this, you will never see the true beauty of life." Through this story, the man realized that to find peace, he did not need to search for it outside, but he had to return within, learn how to stop worrying, and look at everything with a calm perspective, not reacting hastily. Modern life is full of pressure and stress. We are often swept into the cycle of work, worries, responsibilities, and relationships. Every day presents unexpected situations, such as an argument with a colleague, an undeserved criticism, or simply little things that make us feel exhausted. But in those moments, if we don't know how to master our emotions, if we don't know how to keep our minds calm, we will easily be swept away by negative feelings. Things will get worse, and the feelings of stress and anxiety will continue to linger. In fact, we cannot control everything that happens around us, but we can fully control how we respond to them. When facing a difficult situation, if we know how to stop for a moment, breathe deeply, and not react immediately, we will have time to think more clearly. We will see that many things are not worth worrying about, and upon reflection, everything may not be as serious as it seemed at first. One day, the mother's son broke her favorite bowl. The mother was very angry, but before reacting, she decided to sit down and take a deep breath. The feeling of anger surged, but she reminded herself, "My child is just a child, and no matter how important the bowl is, it is just a material object." She paused, thought carefully, and realized that if she reacted right then, it might make her son feel guilty and hurt. She gently said to her son, "It's okay, we'll clean it up together and buy a new bowl." This story is a great example of learning how not to react hastily. Sometimes, in stressful situations, instead of rushing to criticize or react harshly, we need to stop, breathe, and think. A calm and compassionate action can completely change the situation and help us maintain peace in our hearts. Stillness in the mind not only helps us in stressful situations, but also in relationships with others. In every argument, in every misunderstanding, we can easily be swept up in anger or frustration. However, if we learn how to keep our souls calm, we will not let these emotions take control. In another story, a teacher taught his student a lesson about stillness. The teacher said, "When you walk through a field, if there is a cow standing there and looking at you, do you feel angry with it?" The student replied, "No, master, I'm not angry with the cow because it hasn't done anything to me." The teacher smiled and said, "It's the same in life. When others make you sad, angry, or hurt, you should not react immediately. Look at it like the cow, and don't let negative emotions take away the stillness in your heart." Stillness in the mind is not easy to achieve, but it is a valuable practice that the Buddha taught. True peace comes when we learn to accept everything, not react hastily, and keep our minds steady. When facing difficulties or negative emotions, instead of letting them control us, we can stop, breathe, and think clearly. Only when we learn to maintain stillness in our souls can we truly experience peace in life. Peace is not something we can find outside. It is something we create within ourselves. When our souls are still enough, even if there are storms outside, we will not be swept away. We often feel overwhelmed with worries, expectations, unending goals, and unresolved emotions. We want to achieve many things, have many things in hand, and keep everything intact. But in the process, we often forget that peace and happiness do not come from accumulation, but from letting go of what is no longer necessary and living fully in each present moment. The Buddha taught much about letting go, not to give up everything in life, but to accept what comes, release what no longer fits, and live fully in the present. Letting go does not mean failure or giving up, but freeing ourselves from psychological burdens, emotional clouds, and unfulfilled desires. We live in a world where everything seems to demand that we hold on, that we control. From work to relationships, from dreams to memories, we always tend to cling to them. But the truth is, when we keep holding on to what is no longer necessary, we only make our lives heavier. Imagine you are walking on a long road. The further you go, the more tired you feel because you are carrying a backpack full of unnecessary items, old books, torn clothes, letters of no value, sad memories, and unfulfilled promises. If you continue carrying this backpack, there will come a time when you feel you can't walk any further. Your mind is just like that backpack. The more it is burdened with worries, fears, and unachieved ambitions, the more exhausted you feel, and the harder it becomes to move forward. The Buddha taught, we can only be free when we let go of what is no longer needed. Letting go does not mean giving up everything, but learning to recognize what is truly important and learning to loosen what no longer holds value. There is a very meaningful story about letting go that I want to share with you. One day, a mother and her son were walking down a long path. Along the way, they came across a basket full of mud that someone had left behind. The mother, without thinking, picked up the basket and carried it, thinking she would throw it away somewhere after leaving the path. But not long after, an unexpected rain began to fall, making the basket even heavier, and the mother felt extremely tired. The son saw this and asked, "Mom, why don't you put the basket down? You could walk more easily without carrying it." The mother looked at her son and suddenly realized that she had been carrying the basket for so long, just out of habit and worry. She put the basket down, allowing the heavy emotions to fall away, and they continued their journey with joy and lightness. This story is like a lesson about letting go of unnecessary things in life. Just like the muddy basket, we also carry worries, negative emotions, unfulfilled ambitions, and unhealthy relationships. If we don't let go of these things, they will make us tired and unable to continue life's journey with freedom and peace. In addition to letting go of unnecessary things, the Buddha also taught us to live fully in the present. We often let the past and the future dominate our minds, preventing us from fully living in the present moment. We can be haunted by mistakes from the past or worry about things that have not yet happened in the future. forgetting that happiness can only be found in the present moment. There is a great story about a monk and his student. One day, the student went to see the teacher and said, "Master, I always feel worried about the future. I don't know what will happen to me, whether I will succeed in my work, or if I will be able to help others as you do." The teacher smiled and said, "Have you ever worried about how to breathe? You don't worry about your breath, do you? When you live in the present, everything will come naturally to you. Just like your breath, just breathe. Don't think too much about the past or the future. Peace will come when you live fully in each moment." This is a profound teaching about living in the present. We cannot change the past, and the future is always uncertain. The only thing we can control is what is happening right now. That's why living in the present is one of the best ways to find peace. Another story also talks about letting go and living in the present. A wealthy man had a very valuable painting. It was a famous work of art, and he had kept it his entire life. One day, the painting was damaged in a storm. The man was extremely angry, and he tried to repair it, but no matter what, the painting could not be restored to its original condition. At that moment, a friend of his came to visit and asked, "Why are you so sad? That painting may have brought material value, but it cannot bring spiritual value if you are always obsessed with its past." The man thought about it and realized that he had spent too much time preserving something that could not be changed. After that, he let go of the regret and began to live fully in the present, finding joy in simple things like conversations with friends, mornings in the garden, mass, and peaceful moments with family. The Buddha's teaching about letting go is not about giving up everything, but about knowing when to let go. Letting go of psychological burdens, unrealistic expectations, fears, and negative emotions. When we let go, we not only free ourselves from unnecessary things, but also open up a space for peace, freedom, and happiness. Letting go is also about living fully in the present, knowing that each moment is a precious gift. Don't let the past or the future control what we are experiencing. Living in the present is the best way to experience the peace that life brings. When we know how to let go and live in the present, we will find peace within ourselves, and life will become much lighter. Letting go and living fully in the present are very profound teachings that the Buddha has passed on to us. When we learn to let go of unnecessary things and live in the present moment, we will find true peace and happiness. Letting go is not abandonment, but liberation. And living in the present is how we can experience the value of each moment in this life. Modern life, with its fast pace and constant concerns, makes it easy for us to get lost in endless thoughts and pursuits. We keep searching for perfection, wanting to change everything around us to achieve an ideal life. However, the Buddha teaches that true happiness and peace do not come from changing everything, but from living in the present, in mindfulness, and knowing how to be oneself. Presence in life, which means living true to oneself, not reacting hastily, and being mindful in every moment, is the key to finding inner peace. The Buddha teaches that mindfulness is one of the most important elements in practice. Mindfulness is not about seeking a peaceful place, away from the world around us, but about learning to live fully in each moment, wherever we are, and with whomever we are. Mindfulness is not escaping from the noisy world, but the ability to live in it while maintaining peace and not being swept into chaos. Mindfulness is recognizing the value of every moment, being present in life, and being able to listen to oneself. In busy days, we often face many tasks, relationships, and important decisions. It is in these moments that, without mindfulness, we can easily be swept away by worries, stress, and endless thinking. But when we learn to live fully in each moment, focusing on the small things in life, we will realize that everything around us has value. There is a story about an old carpenter who lived in a small village where everyone knew him as a very skilled craftsman. Every time he made a wooden item, from a table to a chair or a cabinet, everything was finely crafted and perfect. One day, a friend came to visit him and asked, "Why is every piece you make so beautiful? Do you have a secret?" The old carpenter smiled and replied, "There is no special secret. It's just that whenever I work, I am completely focused on that task. I don't think about the past or the future. I just focus on every stroke of the hammer, every cut, and every small detail I am making. When I do everything with presence and attention, the results naturally turn out well." This answer from the carpenter made his friend think deeply. He realized that the delicacy and perfection were not the result of special tools or techniques, but from presence, focus, and love the carpenter had for his work. Similarly, in life, happiness and peace come from living fully, being oneself, and not being distracted by external factors. Presence is not only important in work or daily tasks, but also in relationships with others. In relationships, especially with family and friends, we are often easily swept up in worries about the future, expectations, or negative emotions from the past. However, if we cannot live fully in the present, truly present with others, then those relationships will not be deep or meaningful. There is a story about a couple living in a small house. They loved each other, but their busy work schedules meant they had little time for each other. One day, the wife came home late, and her husband was sitting reading the newspaper. The wife felt sad because she had not received any attention from him that day, but she didn't say anything. Instead, she sat down next to him and asked, "Can you listen to me for a moment?" Her husband stopped reading the newspaper, put it down, and looked into her eyes. He said, "I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to you today. I've been busy and didn't realize that you needed attention. Please tell me about your day." At that moment, the wife felt a change in their relationship. It was not because her husband did anything special, but because he had taken the time to truly listen to her, to be present in that moment, and to share feelings with her. Sometimes presence is simply about putting down distractions and spending time with the important people in our lives. Let me tell you a story about a famous monk in the area. People came to seek him out for peace and happiness. One day, someone asked the monk, "Master, how can I live peacefully in this life?" The monk smiled and replied, "Look at the trees around you. They don't worry about the future. They only live in the present, and they have achieved natural peace. You just need to do one simple thing: live fully in the present moment." The person was surprised and asked further, "But how can I live in the present when this life is full of difficulties and worries?" The monk answered, "Yes, life always has difficulties and challenges, but when you do not react hastily, when you can look at everything from a mindful perspective, you will realize that every difficulty can be overcome. The important thing is not to change everything, but to learn how to accept and live in it without being controlled by it." Presence in life is about living true to oneself, not needing to change everything, but simply knowing how to live in each moment and learning to face challenges without reacting hastily. The Buddha taught that true happiness and peace do not come from achieving what we want, but from mindfulness, acceptance, and living fully in the present. When we learn to live like this, not only will our work and relationships become more meaningful, but our lives will become fresher and more complete. Presence, the attention to what is happening right now, is the key to living a life of true peace and happiness. Suffering is an unavoidable theme in everyone's life. From small sorrows to great challenges, we all face suffering throughout our life journey. The Buddha, in his teachings, said that suffering is not something bad, but an essential part of life. It is not something to run from, but an opportunity for us to better understand ourselves, learn how to grow, and find peace in our hearts. In his Four Noble Truths, the Buddha pointed out that suffering, dukkha, is the nature of life. Suffering does not only come from loss and hurt, but also from desires that are never satisfied, from the impermanence of everything in life. When we live in this world, we cannot avoid feelings of pain, disappointment, or difficult moments. However, rather than seeing suffering as something insurmountable, the Buddha advised us to accept it as a part of life, a part of existence. Suffering is the lesson life brings to each of us. Every pain, whether big or small, is an opportunity for us to reflect on ourselves, reevaluate what we have learned, and grow stronger. No one in this life can avoid challenges and difficulties, but how we face and overcome them is what truly matters. There is a story about a man named Ananda. Throughout his life, Ananda always felt dissatisfied with the difficulties and failures he encountered. He felt that he was always unlucky, facing unwanted things, and living in suffering. One day, Ananda came to see the Buddha and asked, "Master, why do I always encounter bad luck and suffering? I can't bear it anymore. Is there any way I can escape this suffering?" The Buddha looked at Ananda with a compassionate gaze and replied, "Ananda, suffering is a part of life. No one can avoid it, but suffering is not the enemy. It is the teacher. Suffering will help you understand yourself and the world better. If you accept it and learn from it, you will find peace in your heart." After hearing the Buddha's teaching, Ananda reflected deeply. He realized that the suffering in life was not something bad, but an opportunity to look at himself and learn from those experiences. He began to learn how to accept suffering as a part of life and gradually felt more at peace. Ananda's story is a clear example of the Buddha's teaching on accepting suffering. When we accept suffering instead of running from it, we will find peace in our hearts. Suffering does not make us weaker, but it helps us become stronger, more enlightened about the nature of life. Suffering is an inevitable part of life, and it helps us grow. When we face challenges, we learn patience, how to confront fear and insecurity, how to let go of unnecessary things, and how to live true to ourselves. It is these difficulties that serve as the foundation for us to develop strength and compassion. Tom lived in a wealthy and happy family, but he always felt a lack in his soul. He thought that only money and success could bring happiness. Tom tried his best to achieve big goals in life, but every time he achieved something, he felt empty and unsatisfied. One day, Tom met a beggar on the street. The beggar had no home, no money, but appeared very calm and happy. Tom was surprised and asked, "Why are you so happy when you have nothing?" The beggar smiled and replied, "Happiness does not come from what we have, but from accepting life as it is." When we no longer desire too much, when we know how to let go of what is unnecessary, we will find peace in our hearts. Tom reflected on the beggar's words and realized that he had been too busy chasing external goals, forgetting that true peace lies within his own heart. He decided to change his way of living, learn to let go of his ambitions, and live fully in the present. Tom's story shows that suffering and difficulties in life do not weaken us, but help us grow. When we face difficulties, we learn how to let go, how to live simply, and how to find peace within ourselves. The Buddha teaches that suffering is an opportunity for us to clearly see the nature of life. When we no longer deny suffering, but accept it and learn from it, we will see that all things and phenomena are impermanent and change. Everything we have, from our bodies to relationships and material possessions, does not last forever. Suffering helps us realize this impermanence. When a loved one passes away, when we experience failure at work, or when we face hardships in life, we begin to understand that all of these are temporary. And it is from this understanding that we can live peacefully and happily. There is a story about a monk who lived in a small temple. One day, a student came and asked, "Master, why do I have to endure all this suffering? Why is life so unfair?" The monk smiled and said, "Have you ever seen a river? It always flows, never stops, and never turns back. That is the nature of life. We cannot hold on to everything. We can only follow its flow. And when you learn to let go, you will find peace in the midst of challenges. The monk's answer helped the student realize that instead of struggling with life, instead of rejecting suffering, we only need to learn to accept and blend into the flow of life. Suffering will not break us if we understand that it is just a part of life, an opportunity for us to learn and grow. Suffering is not something we can avoid, but it is a part of life, an opportunity for us to learn and grow. When we learn to accept suffering instead of avoiding it, we will find peace in our hearts. The Buddha teaches that suffering is not the enemy, but the teacher, an opportunity for us to gain a clearer understanding of the impermanent nature of life and learn to live fully with each moment. Peace does not come from avoiding suffering, but from facing it calmly without rushing to react. Only when we can accept suffering as a part of life can we live in peace and happiness. We are often swept up in worries, work pressures, and complicated relationships. There are times when, because we can't please others, or because of disagreements in life, we easily fall into anger, regret, and sometimes even become victims of our own negative emotions. The Buddha, in his teachings, showed us a path to live peacefully and happily. It is to live with compassion and to forgive ourselves as well as others. These qualities not only help us harmonize with the world around us, but also help us find peace within our own hearts. Compassion in Buddhism is a noble quality that reflects unconditional love for all beings. The Buddha teaches that compassion is not only love for loved ones, but also love for everyone, including those we may not agree with or like. Compassion is an open heart without discrimination, without prejudice, and especially without expectation. Compassion is caring, sharing in the pain of others without expecting anything in return. A simple but profound story about compassion is the story of a father and his child. The father was very strict and always required his child to be perfect in everything. One day, the child broke the father's favorite bowl. The father became angry and was about to scold the child. But after seeing the child's sad face, he stopped and asked, "Do you know how important this bowl is?" The child bowed his head, not daring to answer. At that moment, the father sighed and said, "I am not angry with you because of the bowl. I am angry because you didn't learn to be careful, but I know you didn't mean to break it. Actually, I'm angry because you didn't feel the love and care I've given you. But today, I will forgive you, not because of the bowl, but because I want you to learn to forgive yourself." From this story, we see that compassion is not easy love, but understanding and sharing in the pain of others, while knowing how to forgive when others make mistakes. Compassion helps us see things with a tolerant view, rather than criticizing or blaming. When we can love and forgive others, that is when we open our hearts to receive peace and happiness. Perhaps the hardest thing in life is forgiveness, especially when we are hurt, offended, or abandoned. Forgiveness becomes very difficult. But the Buddha teaches that forgiveness is not to let the other person off the hook, but to free ourselves from suffering, from negative emotions. Forgiveness helps us lighten our hearts, not letting the pain and resentment continue and erode the peace in our souls. A popular story in Buddhist culture is the story of a teacher and a student. One day, the student asked the teacher, "Master, how can I forgive those who have hurt me?" The teacher smiled and said, "Imagine your heart as a lake. When a stone is thrown into the lake, the water becomes muddy and ripples. But if you don't throw any more stones, the water will settle and become clear." Forgiveness is the way to help your heart return to tranquility, like the lake without ripples. This answer from the teacher helped the student realize that forgiveness is not about forgetting the pain or ignoring the injustice, but about freeing oneself from anger and resentment. Forgiveness is the choice to not let the past control the present and spoil our future. Only when we learn to forgive can we find peace in our hearts. A story about forgiveness that I would like to share is the story of a woman named Lan. Lan had a younger brother named Min, who always did things that made the family worry and feel heartbroken. Min had lied to the family, taken money from their parents, and spent it recklessly. After many times of forgiving him, Lan felt deeply disappointed and angry, feeling like she could no longer forgive her brother. One day, Lan met an old friend, and the friend asked, "Why can't you forgive Min?" Lan replied, "I have forgiven him so many times, but he keeps lying to me and the family. I can't forgive him anymore." Lan's friend sighed and said, "Forgiveness is not about whether the other person deserves it, but about freeing yourself from the anger in your heart. You cannot change the past, but you can decide not to let it control you anymore." Remember, when you forgive Min, you are not only forgiving him, but you are also forgiving yourself. At that moment, Lan felt a sense of relief in her heart. She decided to meet Min, look into his eyes, and say, "I forgive you. You don't need to change because I have learned to accept you as you are." Lan's forgiveness not only helped Min feel relieved, but also helped her find peace in her heart. Lan and Min's story shows that forgiveness doesn't only help relationships, it also helps us find inner peace. Living sincerely and compassionately means living not just for oneself, but for the happiness and peace of others. Compassion is not only shown in forgiveness, but also in caring, sharing, and helping others. When we live with compassion, we not only beautify the lives of others, but also enhance our own lives. Another short story is about a wealthy man named Hoa. Despite having all the material things, he always felt a lack and loneliness. One day, Hoa decided to visit a temple and meet the Buddha. He asked, "Master, I have everything, but I still don't feel happy. How can I find peace in this life?" The Buddha smiled and replied, "Happiness does not come from what we possess, but from what we know how to share and love. Happiness is when we know how to live sincerely with ourselves and others, when we can see the pain of others and be ready to help them." Hoa, after hearing this, realized that he had been living for himself for too long and not paying attention to those around him. He decided to change his way of living, sharing his wealth with the poor and spending time helping those in need. Gradually, he felt his heart warm, and happiness was no longer something he had to search for outside, but it came from giving and loving. Compassion and forgiveness are qualities that help us live in harmony with ourselves and others. The Buddha teaches that living sincerely and compassionately not only helps us find peace in our hearts, but also helps us build a better world. When we live with compassion and learn to forgive, we not only free ourselves from suffering, but also help those around us live in peace. When we forget to listen to ourselves, we get caught up in the rush of time, busy with work, worrying about family, friends, and many other responsibilities. But in all this hustle, do we ever stop and ask ourselves, what do I really want? Or what is my heart saying? The Buddha taught that to find peace in the heart, we must first know how to listen to and recognize ourselves. Returning to oneself, stopping in stillness to feel and understand the true thoughts, feelings, and desires of the heart is an important journey to live a peaceful and happy life. Listening to oneself is a skill we need to learn and practice. Sometimes, in the pressure of life, we lose the ability to listen to our inner voice. We get swept up by external things, other people's opinions, and often follow the expectations society or loved ones place on us. However, the Buddha always emphasized that inner stillness is the path to deep understanding of oneself. One way to help us listen to ourselves is to find a quiet space to stop all thoughts and simply breathe. When we stop and listen to ourselves, we will realize that our emotions, thoughts, and desires always send clear signals. A young girl named Hoa will help us understand more about the importance of listening to oneself. Hoa is a girl who lives in a big city, always busy with work and studies. She constantly tries to meet the expectations of her family and friends, but deep inside, she always feels a sense of emptiness, a sense of dissatisfaction, even though she has everything. Hoa begins to feel that she no longer knows what she truly wants. One day, Hoa decided to go to a small temple in the suburbs to find peace. After joining a meditation session with the monks, she began to feel the silence in her soul. She sat quietly, listened to each breath and each heartbeat, and gradually realized that all the feelings of anxiety and restlessness she had been experiencing were just reactions of her mind when it was not being noticed. She felt relieved when she no longer tried to chase after a goal, but simply lived in the present. Hoa's story shows that sometimes we need to stop, listen to ourselves, and recognize what is truly important to us. Listening is not just hearing with the ears, but feeling with the heart, understanding what we need and want to live a meaningful life. Listening to oneself is very important, but self-awareness is the next step. When we listen to ourselves, it is important not just to hear what we want to hear, but also to face the emotions, thoughts, and even deep fears that we may be avoiding. Self-awareness helps us better understand the motives behind our actions, the desires and beliefs we carry in our hearts. The Buddha taught that when we understand ourselves clearly, we can control our minds, not letting them be swept away by negative emotions or unconscious thoughts. Imagine a person named Nam, who always tries to please everyone, but deep inside, he always feels uneasy and unhappy. Nam often worries about whether he is doing well enough, whether he is pleasing others. He is always afraid of being abandoned or judged by others. Therefore, he constantly tries to prove himself through success and the acceptance of others. One day, during a meditation session, Nam felt the stillness in his soul. He began to listen and become aware of his thoughts and feelings. He realized that, for so long, he had been living in fear and anxiety, always seeking approval from others, not understanding that he himself was the one who determined his happiness. He realized that he didn't need to please everyone to feel valued, but self-acceptance was the most important thing. After the meditation session, Nam decided to change the way he lived. He learned to listen and understand his feelings and thoughts without judging them. He began to live more sincerely, no longer trying to change himself to meet the expectations of others. Nam realized that, when he understood himself, he could find true peace and happiness. When we return to ourselves and listen to what our heart is saying, we not only become aware of our emotions, but also gain the ability to master them. Mindfulness is the ability to live fully in each moment, aware of our emotions and thoughts without letting them dominate our lives. When we can master our emotions and actions, we will live a freer and more peaceful life. A monk who lives in a remote temple can illustrate this mindfulness. One day, a visitor came to visit the monk and asked, "Master, how do you live peacefully without being controlled by negative emotions?" The monk smiled and replied, "I don't try to push away negative emotions or avoid them. I just listen to them, recognize them as part of myself, and then let them pass. When I live with mindfulness, I do not let myself be swept away by emotions, but instead, I become clearly aware of them and allow them to pass." The monk's answer reminds us that mindfulness is not a state of escaping emotions, but the ability to face and understand them. When we are aware of our emotions without reacting hastily, we will have the ability to control our actions and not let negative emotions control our lives. Listening and self-awareness are essential journeys for us to live fully with ourselves. When we know how to listen to our hearts and become aware of our emotions and thoughts, we will be able to live a life free from being controlled by external expectations. To live fully, we need to learn how to return to ourselves, take control of our lives, and live with mindfulness. The Buddha teaches that inner stillness is the path to deep understanding of oneself. One of the ways to help us listen to ourselves is to find a quiet space to stop all thoughts and simply breathe. When we stop and listen to ourselves, we will realize that our emotions, thoughts, and desires always send clear signals. A young girl named Hoa will help us understand more about the importance of listening to oneself. Hoa is a girl who lives in a big city, always busy with work and studies. She constantly tries to meet the expectations of her family and friends, but deep inside, she always feels a sense of emptiness, a sense of dissatisfaction, even though she has everything. Hoa begins to feel that she no longer knows what she truly wants. One day, Hoa decided to go to a small temple in the suburbs to find peace. After joining a meditation session with the monks, she began to feel the silence in her soul. She sat quietly, listened to each breath and each heartbeat, and gradually realized that all the feelings of anxiety and restlessness she had been experiencing were just reactions of her mind when it was not being noticed. She felt relieved when she no longer tried to chase after a goal, but simply lived in the present. Hoa's story shows that sometimes we need to stop, listen to ourselves, and recognize what is truly important to us. Listening is not just hearing with the ears, but feeling with the heart, understanding what we need and want to live a meaningful life. Listening to oneself is very important, but self-awareness is the next step. When we listen to ourselves, it is important not just to hear what we want to hear, but also to face the emotions, thoughts, and even deep fears that we may be avoiding. Self-awareness helps us better understand the motives behind our actions, the desires and beliefs we carry in our hearts. The Buddha taught that when we understand ourselves clearly, we can control our minds, not letting them be swept away by negative emotions or unconscious thoughts. Imagine a person named Nam, who always tries to please everyone, but deep inside he always feels uneasy and unhappy. Nam often worries about whether he is doing well enough, whether he is pleasing others. He is always afraid of being abandoned or judged by others. Therefore, he constantly tries to prove himself through success and the acceptance of others. One day, during a meditation session, Nam felt the stillness in his soul. He began to listen and become aware of his thoughts and feelings. He realized that, for so long, he had been living in fear and anxiety, always seeking approval from others, not understanding that he himself was the one who determined his happiness. He realized that he didn't need to please everyone to feel valued, but self-acceptance was the most important thing. After the meditation session, Nam decided to change the way he lived. He learned to listen and understand his feelings and thoughts without judging them. He began to live more sincerely, no longer trying to change himself to meet the expectations of others. Nam realized that when he understood himself, he could find true peace and happiness. When we return to ourselves and listen to what our heart is saying, we not only become aware of our emotions, but also gain the ability to master them. Mindfulness is the ability to live fully in each moment, aware of our emotions and thoughts without letting them dominate our lives. When we can master our emotions and actions, we will live a freer and more peaceful life. A monk who lives in a remote temple can illustrate this mindfulness. One day, a visitor came to visit the monk and asked, "Master, how do you live peacefully without being controlled by negative emotions?" The monk smiled and replied, "I don't try to push away negative emotions or avoid them. I just listen to them, recognize them as part of myself, and then let them pass. When I live with mindfulness, I do not let myself be swept away by emotions, but instead, I become clearly aware of them and allow them to pass." The monk's answer reminds us that mindfulness is not a state of escaping emotions, but the ability to face and understand them. When we are aware of our emotions without reacting hastily, we will have the ability to control our actions and not let negative emotions control our lives. Listening and self-awareness are essential journeys for us to live fully with ourselves. When we know how to listen to our hearts and become aware of our emotions and thoughts, we will be able to live a life free from being controlled by external expectations. To live fully, we need to learn how to return to ourselves, take control of our lives, and live with mindfulness. The practice is not an easy journey. When we return to ourselves and become aware of our emotions and thoughts, we will face challenges and sufferings that sometimes we do not want to acknowledge. However, it is these challenges that offer us the opportunity to grow and find peace. Living peacefully in the storms of life is the story of a monk. One day, a great storm arrived, sweeping away everything around. Many people in the village panicked and ran away, but the monk calmly sat in the temple. Someone asked the monk, "Aren't you afraid? This storm will destroy everything." The monk smiled and replied, "The storm will come and it will go. It is all part of life. What is important is not avoiding the storm, but how to keep our hearts from being swept up by it. Even if there is chaos outside, we can still maintain peace within." The monk's answer reminds us that life will always have challenges and difficulties, but peace only comes when we learn to face them and live with them calmly. When we live with deep awareness of ourselves, we will have the ability to maintain inner peace in any situation, no matter how the outside world may change. The path of practice is not a destination, but a continuous process. Each step in practice helps us become more clearly aware of ourselves, our emotions, thoughts, and actions. When we understand ourselves, we will easily take control of our lives, not being swept away by anxiety and insecurity. Practice is not a journey to become someone else, but to become ourselves, to live sincerely and find peace in our hearts. The Buddha taught that only when we understand ourselves can we find true freedom and happiness. And when we live with that understanding, we will live a life full of meaning and peace. The practice is not a faraway or difficult journey, but the path back to ourselves. When we stop and listen, becoming clearly aware of ourselves, we will find peace and happiness. Every day, we only need a little time to return, listen to our hearts, and live sincerely with ourselves. Then life will become much lighter and more meaningful. Sometimes we are too busy with worries and responsibilities that we forget to listen to ourselves. In those times, our hearts seem tired and broken because we cannot find a solid ground. The Buddha taught that in the process of practice, we don't need to do anything too grand or achieve great accomplishments, but to find peace within ourselves. The saying, "The more we practice, the calmer the mind," is simple but carries great power. Peace of heart does not come from the outside, from changes or circumstances, but from when we learn to face ourselves, to acknowledge our emotions, fears, and let go of unnecessary things. It is through understanding ourselves, accepting our sufferings, and living in the present that we gradually find true peace. Practice is not a long, arduous path, but a journey back to ourselves, a journey where we learn to listen, let go, and love ourselves and those around us. Like a river, though the water may stir, if we know how to stop, observe, and understand, the water will become still again. When we learn to live in the stillness of the soul, we are no longer afraid of the external changes. We understand that, even though storms may come, our hearts remain firm, like a clear lake, unaffected by any wind. Peace is not a destination, but a state that we can experience every day, as long as we are still enough and open enough. So, do not rush after what is out there. Take the time to stop, listen to your heart, and slow down. Peace will come when you know how to stop and breathe, when you know how to love and accept yourself. Let your soul relax, let go of worries, and embrace serenity. Remember, you are never alone in this journey. Every step, no matter how small, brings you closer to true peace. When your heart is calm, life becomes lighter and more comfortable. Live slowly, live fully, and let your soul return to itself, for that is where you truly belong. Remember, peace is not far away. It is right there in each breath you take.